Hi, we're back to talk about seeds again this week, how to save seeds for vegetables and other useful plants. And we talked about tomatoes last week, and we put some tomato seeds aside, so we'll have to strain those before the end of the broadcast today. But we're going to talk mostly about greens, because this is the time of year when greens are going to seed, and it's a great opportunity to collect the seeds, as many of them are just falling off your greens. Some people say, well, my main problem with greens is that they bolt to seed too quickly. So if you have greens that you're trying to slow down how fast they go to seed so they stay in good eating condition a bit longer, you can just try to keep them cool and well watered, and maybe put a little shade cloth over them so that they're not baking in the heat of the sun, and that actually slows down how fast they go to seed. But they do start to go to seed finally, and that's a wonderful thing. So we have some beautiful lettuces that are growing in the garden out here, and they are at various stages of going to seed. We got the basil there, but we'll be back to that. But we have lettuces that are at different stages of development, and you'll notice that they have those tight little buds when they're just getting started, and then those tight little buds open up into little yellow flowers that look like a kind of tiny dandelion flower, and then those turn into little white fluff, much like dandelion flowers turn into white fluff. The lettuce plant will produce many of these on long stalks, and they don't all ripen at once, so you have to go into your lettuce patch several times every 3 days or so to collect the seeds as they ripen, because they just kind of fall off or get carried away by the wind. Most lettuce seed is silvery gray, some of it's almost white, some of it's a bit of a darker gray, and some of it is black, but most of it is gray. And it's not a long-lived seed, so gather the seed, dry them in paper bags, and after about 3 weeks in a paper bag, put them into tightly sealed jars. And you've only got maybe 2 to 3 years of viability in lettuce seed. So it's good to plant your lettuce every couple of years. Like, make sure that you grow those seeds out every couple of years so that you can keep those varieties in your family. We also want to talk a little bit about other greens. This is an interesting green here, and most North Americans are not too familiar with it. This is purslane, and purslane is a succulent plant, and it sprawls on the ground and produces very tiny yellow flowers. It's similar to, and maybe related to, that portulaca plant, which produces the beautiful flowers that survive drought. And as you can see, it has millions of little black seeds that fall out of it. The only way to harvest the seeds on purslane is to pick the purslane and shake it in a paper bag, because the seeds will just keep falling off as they ripen, and you will never really be able to collect it unless you collect some of the plant as well. This is a really great thing to have because it's very drought tolerant. It grows with very little soil. It will grow in window boxes. It will grow in largely abandoned planters, and it will be a good source of nourishment, and I think some good omega fats. Anyway, please enjoy this plant, purslane. It's a big hit in Holland, I believe. Now we're going to talk about a couple of these very familiar weeds. Here's a very familiar weed. And we also have some, looking for the plate. I don't know. I have another thing. Anyway, here is lamb's quarters, and as you can see, it is now flowering, but the seeds are not ripe yet. It was very late this year because we had a drought, and it didn't really get going until June. And this is a wonderful weed. It's related to quinoa and also to beets. It's in the Quinopodia family, which I think has something to do with having goose-shaped feet or something. Anyway, the seeds of lamb's quarters are similar to what, because the plant is similar to quinoa, and actually when they're first growing, they're hard to, like you would think it was quinoa if you only knew quinoa when it first sprouts. You will find that the seeds are also edible. So if you don't eat the green when it's growing as a green, which is till it's about maybe 8 inches high, it's good eating, maybe 10 inches high. After that it starts to get a bit stringy. If you keep cutting it back, it will keep producing tender shoots. But the little tiny black seeds that fall out of this are also very nutritious and can be added to things like porridge or rice. I think they can even be popped, but they're very, very tiny. Anyway, think of this as a wonderful emergency food, and if it grows in your garden, just be glad it turned up. And always let 1 or 2 of them mature enough that they produce a few seeds, so you'll always have a few of these in your garden. They're wonderful. If they grow by the roadside or in a back alley and it grows under harsh conditions, it may not be as tender. So if you treat this tenderly, it will be tender to eat. I have some amaranth somewhere. Where's the amaranth? You have the amaranth. I must have the second. Ah, good. So amaranth is another plant that is multi-purpose. When it's young, it has delicious greens, and there are some kinds of amaranth that are grown mostly for the greens. But as you know, there's grain amaranth as well, and it will simply have larger seeds than the green amaranth. But it's a big family. Callaloo is in this family. Red root pigweed is in this family. Love lies in weeping is in this family. And they produce these beautiful little shiny seeds, tiny shiny black seeds that are also extremely good eating. And it's also a very decorative plant, so people like to have it around. And here's a plant I'd like to talk about. Oh, no, wait a second. We're going to go to this first. We have brassicas are wonderful greens, and this is a piece of a broccoli that was beginning to flower and produce little pods. These pods are not ripe, so there are no ripe seeds in here yet. But this is a big family. Arugula, the various mustards. I have a little mustard. And anyway, they usually have white or yellow flowers and occasionally sort of pinkish flowers. And they include the rat-tail radish family, broccoli, cabbages, various Asian greens, which are usually fairly quick to grow. They grow fast, so you can use them in your same mix as your lettuces because they grow quickly. The broccoli that goes to seed the same year, usually, if you let it. Cabbages, which usually only go to seed the second year, so they are biennial. Many of the Asian greens and other brassica family will cross. So you never know for sure whether the seeds you collect from these are going to produce exactly what the parent plant looked like or tasted like. But it's all edible, so no matter what happens as far as the crossing goes, whatever kind of cross you get will be something tasty and usable. The only thing I want to warn people about is that rutabagas, which are also in this cabbage family, are in the They are the same species as the canola, which is now mostly genetically modified. So you might want to make sure that if you are growing your greens around, or if you're growing your turnips, your rutabagas around a canola field, that you might just want to isolate, perhaps with a muslin bag or something, the flower sprays that you're going to be collecting seed from, so that you're not getting genetically modified canola genes mixed in with your brassicas. Another green, which is a lot of fun, garlic is a green too. I know it's a root and it's a bulb, but first of all, you should know how to grow garlic. And I suppose you know, most of you might know that if you plant the cloves, you should plant them in the fall, usually around the middle to the end of October in our area here in Toronto. And they grow slowly through the winter, and they usually have a harvest in July. But what happens is that they send up scapes toward the end of the spring. In June, usually you harvest scapes. And the scapes are delicious greens, beautiful garlicky tasting greens. And then if you leave the scape on, it will produce a flower. It's not a true flower, it's a flower that consists of many little clones of the parent plant. I don't know why garlic doesn't produce true flowers. It doesn't appear to be pollinatable in any way, but it still produces many offspring. And these tiny little clones of the parent plant are what the scape produces if it's left on. And these can be sprouted as well and turned into greens. They are delicious in and of themselves if you just throw them into soups and stews. But you can also let them sprout and they will produce tiny little thread-like green, a single little leaf or two that comes out the top. And then that's all edible as a green sprout of garlic, and they're delicious. And here's another plant we don't usually think of as a green. These are sweet potatoes. We have 4 kinds of sweet potatoes here. I think 3 or 4 kinds. Anyway, I used to think that you could only eat the tubers, but apparently the greens are also a great eating and a great emergency food as well, because so many people grow ornamental sweet potatoes, and those are also edible, providing you don't put a whole lot of junk on them to make them toxic. So if they're organically grown, the ornamental or the usually just the plain old food type sweet potato greens are just as edible as the tubers. But the other thing is you can keep them going over the winter, and you can make cuttings in the spring around the end of April, and you make the cutting at the node where a leaf joins the stem, and those nodes will produce roots. Even if you just put them in water, they will root in water. You may be able to keep your sweet potatoes growing indoors as ornamental plants over the winter, depending on the conditions in your house. They'll just slow down. And outdoors, they need a long season to produce a good tuber, but they always do produce the greens. If you harvest the greens, however, you will sacrifice the tuber pretty much. It will not develop properly because the food that goes into the tuber is produced by the leaves, photosynthesizing. But anyway, it's a lovely thing to keep around. Sweet potatoes, yes, you can grow them in Toronto, and they're wonderful. And they're delicious, and they're drought tolerant too, which your regular white type potatoes or Yukon Golds or whatever are not. They are not drought tolerant. They stop growing if they dry out for even just a week. And these guys will get right back growing as soon as they get a good rain. And I'm going to talk about goldenrod. Goldenrod is a green, but it's also more an herb because it has wonderful medicinal qualities. This is, of course, the fresh plant. And here's a spray of the goldenrod that I've cut and dried for tea. I use this tea in the winter. It is at least as effective for female urinary tract infections as cranberry to prevent them. It does the same slippery thing with the bladder. It's a mild, pleasant tea. If you find it too boring in the mild sense, you can always mix it in with a bit of mint or lemon balm to make it a little tastier, but it's quite pleasant just by itself. And you should probably pick the flower sprays that are not quite as open as this one. This is an open spray, but if you get them a little more closed up, that's the ideal point to pick them at. And they are available for, they're growing everywhere, and they're just a wonderful free source of nourishment for pollinators and humans alike. And what else did I want to show you? There's something else to show you. Oh, the tomato. That's what we have to do. We have to do the yucky tomato. So you remember last week we put a tomato aside. We hollowed out a tomato and put the yucky stuff, the stuff inside aside to get yucky. And there they are. There's the rotten tomato. Doesn't quite smell very palatable anymore. It got pretty moldy, and then I stuck it in the fridge to slow down the fermentation a bit. And so what you do now is you have to add a bit of water. And we'll just smoosh it up a bit. So I'll use this stem off the garlic to do the smooshing. What the heck is a stick? Garlic and tomatoes, they go together. So what happens when you add the water is you will notice that the viable seeds will sink to the bottom. See how there's little seeds stuck to the bottom there? That's right. And so we will pour off this yucky water a couple of times. Some more water in there. Yucky tomato. And those seeds are pretty clean looking already. See, if the seeds float, then they don't have any life in them, so you don't worry about those. But these are now beautiful tomato seeds, and they are clean enough to save. So we're just going to rinse them one more time and pour them through a sieve. Pour all at once through the sieve, and there they are draining. And now I'm going to grab a piece of paper towel. Somewhere, paper towel. All we need is some paper. How about this? I've got a liquor store bag. This is perfect. Let's put that there. Because really, this just needs to go on some kind of paper. And the trick with these is you have to snap this down really smartly where you won't splash the lead cap. There are the tomato seeds drying on paper. They will be there for about 3 weeks drying, and then I will peel them off, and then little jar, and they will be good for next year and probably for about 10 years after that. These tomato seeds are remarkably long-lived if you give them good storage. And if anybody has any questions, let us know. Thank you. Should I give a little blurb for Seeds of Diversity? I guess I should. I was talking about different kinds of brassicas, and last week we talked about different kinds of squash. This is the book that tells you. This is the book that tells you how to tell which ones will cross with what. I highly recommend this book. Contact Seeds of Diversity Canada, and they will mail you a copy of this book for a reasonable price, which I think is about $12 to have it mailed to you. Maybe it's going to be up to $15 when they have the new edition out. But this really, really is helpful if you're going to be a seed saver. I highly recommend it. But even if you don't get this book, please save seeds.
Where's the website to get this book?
www.seeds.ca.
So folks, if you want a copy of this book, go to the website www.seeds.ca.
And next week I think we're going to talk about fruiting things that you might want to propagate. Berries and other kinds of fruits. How to stratify things for the winter. Things like that. We'll see what else is going to seed in the garden.
And we are going to take a 2-minute break and then come back with a slideshow.
Very good.
So we're going for a break.
Okay. Still not my